I shall say that my already 2 or 3 years relation as an academic with the International Dock Workers Council has been very important for me, both academically and personally. It's a very unique union that refuses to pay the profits using the permanent harassment over workers, the permanent cuts in the salaries, the cuts in welfare state, refuses to negotiate the eternal social assistance, and fights for jobs and fights against precarity in a very concrete way, not just in words, but promoting concrete actions that include solidarity movements that have been absolutely essential. There is no way to fight against, we will not fight against globalization. Living in a world without borders, it's not a problem. The problem is globalization of bad labor conditions. And we cannot fight against the globalization of bad labor conditions without a strong international movement. So IDC has been a permanent inspiration, either because the workers that earn 500 or less euros in the south have joined, either because the workers that still have really protect labor rights in the north fight for the other workers, understanding that they are fighting for themselves as well. Thank you very much for this. My compliments to the IDC. The essential of capitalist accumulation is low wages nowadays. The idea is not bringing the social pact in Europe after 1945 that was gained in a situation that capitalism was absolutely destroyed after 1945, and workers were soldiers. Workers had guns massively all around Europe, and the United States capital with the Marshall Plan invested in Europe and convinced the workers to give back the guns in the exchange of the welfare state and protected work. This has changed more or less in the 80s. They have tried to change in the 70s, but it was not possible due to strong struggle that spread after 74, something that has started here in Portugal with the 25th of April, has spread to Greece, to Spain, and has changed the social balance in all Europe. But in fact, in the 80s, it was possible to break the main unions that were highly combative and that refused the pre-retirement system, the social assistance system, refused the precarious situation, cutting hours and cutting salaries, etc. The biggest example are the miners' strike in the 80s in England, but there were other important strikes among shipyard workers and among metal workers in Europe in the 80s. What was decided by then in the framework of the European Union was that it was too difficult to fight workers' rights in the situation like it happened in England, because the British miners' strike, as we know, was defeated but had high costs, political costs for the entire Europe. So what was decided in the framework of the European Union, according to my own research, was to promote not general dismisses without any support and closing of the factories and of the companies, but it's something different that we have nowadays but was born at a time. This something different is giving rights to the ones that were older and make the younger precarious. So with a hundreds of unions around Europe, from Sweden to Southern Europe, was negotiated that the old ones would keep their rights, but there could be a percentage of 30, 40, 50% of precarious work in that sector. The second was that these precarious workers, to avoid revolts, would have permanent social assistance program. And please, because this is part of my work, I'm very proud with my colleagues, social assistance is not welfare state, because welfare state is universal, is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor, you enter in a hospital and you are treated according to distribution of taxes that have to be progressive taxes. Social assistance, it's toward unemployment and low wages, the so-called working poor. So you don't get enough money to live, so you are entitled to have some health, some education, some housing. But this is not universal. This is to manage what is called the surplus population, or this extra population of people that are permanently unemployed and precarious, because most of the unemployment is not structural unemployment. People are not dismissed and they never go back again to the labor market. They are dismissed and they are precarious worker, unemployed worker, precarious worker, unemployed worker. So there were created these social assistance programs towards this population to keep them unemployed. I will say this again because I'm absolutely sure of what I'm telling you. To keep unemployment. The policy of flexibilization is not to fight unemployment, it's to create more unemployment, because unemployment is the only way to cut down salaries. Because unemployment is the only way to have a permanent pressure over the salaries of the people that are working with rights. Because if you have a number of people working with rights inside the company and you have the same number outside saying we are willing to work for half of the price, then you have the permanent competition. This permanent competition in Malthus' theory was achieved by the number of population. So lots of population. There was a relation, I cannot explain this now very shortly, but it would be the number of the population itself that would fix the salaries in capitalist mode of production. It is not like that. As Karl Marx has pointed out in Capital, what he came to explain is that the only way to pressure salaries is to have enough population of unemployed people. If you go nowadays to the liberal research centers in all academy, including the Portuguese Central Bank, you will have there, written by liberals, exactly the same as Karl Marx has pointed out in the 19th century. The unemployment regulates the salaries, which is a euphemism for unemployment people guarantee low wages and a permanent pressure over salaries. So what we have in the European Union since the last 20, 30 years, it's a growing of unemployment, it's a growing of flexibility laws that were done to fight unemployment, but we see a growing of both, of flexibility laws and of unemployment. Of course, because a precarious worker is an employed worker. They are the same persons we are speaking about. Unfortunately, as you know, there are real difficult, not just a problem of bureaucracy or yellow unions. It is difficult to organize unemployed workers, and this is one of the big challenges we have in this 21st century. So we have a pre-retirement that went to millions of workers in Europe. We have social assistance programs towards the poor working classes. Nowadays, we have a multiple forms of low wages, which is the mini jobs instead of reducing the time to everybody without reducing the salaries in order we can live, so we know that we work to live instead of living for working, because everybody has to work. Work must be divided by the society. Of course, we all should produce to the society, but the scheme that we are living on is not like that. The idea is that the idea proposed by the Minister of Finance, Schäuble, from Angela Merkel, is exactly to promote diminishing of the working hours with diminishing of the salaries. What have been done to to avoid again social conflicts with this is that the Social Security pays the rest of the salary that is not paid by the company that has done the cutting of working wages. But now you can think with me, what is Social Security? It's the workers' money. So it's the workers' money that is being used to pay part of the salary of the private and public companies, because this is used with the state as well. As we know, the state is not someone neutral here. Although in the idea of social dialogue, the state appears as neutral, we have seen since 2008, nobody has doubt that the state is not neutral, because the state doesn't help a debt of the worker to the bank to pay his own house, but the same state saves billions of devaluated actions and properties of a bank. So we now don't have doubt of the role of the state in designing labor relations. So we are achieving with this. Then we have other situations, some of them terrible. For example, 30 years ago, the companies would have low production times. It's normal. It's, by the way, the law, the regular law of capitalism working. So it's the free market working. When the free market is really working without permanent pressure over the state to save the companies, companies have periods of big demands and periods of short demands. 30 years ago, this would be called internal unemployment. So people would be at home, paid by the company, while there is less demands. Nowadays, these workers, of course, are eventual workers. They are thrown out of the company, or they are sent to fake layoffs or to real layoffs that are covered by the idea of training. Permanent training. In fact, most of the workers are not being trained for anything. So we have the case in companies that we study where the workers are, for example, specialized metal workers, and they are sent to learn English and how to work with computers and other things. This is not about training, about what they do in their daily life in the work. It's about using an excuse for the worker to be paid by Social Security, by himself, because he's the one who pays Social Security, and not by the company. So we have these layoffs, this fake training, and of course, when I'm referring Social Security, this is within the framework of European Social Fund. So the so-called structural funds for European Union are not just building highways for the German low wages worker, because Germany has frozen the salary since the last 15 years, and we cannot look to the crisis of the European Union as a German problem. This is a problem between capital and labor. It's not a problem between the Germans and the Greeks, the Germans and the Portuguese, the French and the Danish. Because as we know, there are lots of Portuguese bankers, Greek bankers, that we, together with German bankers, are happy with this situation of 15 million poor people in Europe. So this system has led to a process where in some countries at this moment, officially, we have more than half of the working population of the active of the active population, more than half of the active population is in situation of precarious or unemployment. And the governments have understood that with this, they can be strong enough to cut the salaries of the ones that signed the agreements to have rights in the late 80s. Because now they are the minority. The workers with rights, they are the minority and they are pressured by a huge amount of people with no work or in precarious situation. And this has a terrible impact as well in the welfare state and social security, because before a worker would win 2,000 euros, and the one that gets retirement, he earns 2,000 euros as well. So there is a age, so between young people and old people, to pay for the social security. Now, with people earning 500 euros, they do not pay enough for the ones that are earning 2,000. But the ones that are earning 2,000, they pay according to 2,000. So the problem of social security sustainability in Europe is not a problem of people getting age. This is a great news that people are getting old. The problem is the problem of labor relations inside the European Union. And the problem is that the project of the European Union is to make a China in European Union, because with this situation, the workers are coming to exhaustion situation. So several doctors, psychologists are studying the conditions of the workers inside the companies. And of another situation that I forgot to mention that is very important is the subcontract system. What has happened to the subcontract system is that the big companies they were cut in different dozens of companies, and to the small companies went the labor, so the costs. Labor is not a cost, by the way. All people pay their own salary, and the other part of the salary goes to the boss. So everybody that works enough for their salary and to produce even a surplus. But in the subcontract system was created a very odd situation that unions fail to discuss. The problem is that the big company was cutted juridically in dozens of companies. These dozens of companies are small companies that have to pay the salary, the social security, and everything for the worker. And when we say in Portugal that the minimum wage has to go to 600, 700, 800 euros, that would be, today a minimum wage would be 900 euros in Portugal or something like that. They say, we cannot pay because we go to bankruptcy. And this is true. The problem is that these small companies shouldn't exist at all, because they are just a juridical way to manage workforce. Because when we go to the big company, the profit is all concentrated there. Why? Because they work, they don't pay the workers, and they kept all the profits. And that's why we have reached to a situation nowadays, in 2015, where 80 people in the world, 80, have the same richness as 50% of the entire population that is living. That's obscene, that's absolutely intolerable, and that has to be understood in this restructuring of the labor force in the last 30 years. So here the question of full employment is absolutely necessary, because it's the only way to fight competition among salaries. It's the only way to have a life back, because people cannot be permanently threat. We cannot be, not even when we were animals, we were living permanently threat by a bigger animal or by a hunter. We need to live in cooperation, of course, innovation, some kind of competition, not this economic competition, but competition among humans is, I believe that's no problem on this. Seeing the competition as something where we play football and we want to win, that's normal. We don't have to be all equal. That's awful. And we know by the experience that has happened, so-called real communism in Soviet Union, that were awful. But this cannot be used as also a threat that we cannot change the barbarian mode of accumulation that we live in. We need to find, in the competition, we need to find cooperation that guarantees people education, houses, health, because there is no freedom without these necessities to be assured. The real freedom is not what we have nowadays. The real freedom is what we can gain, what we can create, what we construct when we finish this situation, that people every day, every hour are threat or on the way they can survive. They do not have that assured. We don't make kids for 3 months, so we cannot have contracts for 3 months. We don't put a child in the world for 6 months, for 1 year. We put it for life, so we need to make plans. And make plans mean having a protected job. This is absolutely essential. We don't buy a house for 1 month. We build a house as something that is comfortable for us. It takes many years to build this house. We make plans, we make human relations. We are not commodities to be changed every day, every week in the hands of the companies from one city to another. And there is no richness associated with this mode of accumulation. That's fake. That's absolutely the opposite, because the workers are getting healed inside the factories and the companies. We are losing workers, not just with dead accidents. We are losing workers because they are in burnout, because they are permanent harassment with these ratings and a huge management system that has proved to be absolutely inefficient. The management private system has bankrupt in 2008. The biggest private companies of the world, the bank companies, they went bankrupt. So how can we say that a protected worker will not be efficient when we see exactly the opposite? A precarious worker is demoralized. He has extremely difficulty to be in love with his job. He's not focused on his job. He's focused on surviving. So for us as a society, and the society is their people, is much more important to see how people will live good, working, because we should all work, how people will live in a good situation, and now a society cannot be measured by the amount of money that a CEO can distribute in the end of the year because he has dismantled a company. Because, of course, if I sell my house, I will, and by pieces, if I sell the fridge, then I sell the washing machine, then I sell the room, then I sell the television, I will have money, but I will not have a house. And that is what is being done with the companies. The rate of rotation of capital, that means when you are an employer, you put your money and you go back there to pick it up. Could be 20 years or 40 years, because if I go here to plant oak to do extraordinary wood, it takes me 40 years to have that wood back. So building a port takes ages, as you know. The richness doesn't come immediately to us. But if I go to a company, I cut it in pieces, I dismiss the workers, then I will have so-called extraordinary results at the end of the year, as I would have extraordinary amount of money in my bank account if I sell my house and destroy it. But then I will not have a house to continue to live and produce richness. So this is absolutely chaotic and irrational system. And the only persons, as Felipe pointed out, and I have to say something in Portuguese now. Eu conheço o Felipe e o António Mariano pessoalmente, de quem me tornei amiga. A melhor parte, aliás, não é de trabalho, é quando nós convivemos à volta de uma sardinhada, de um copo de vinho, e eles têm sido imensamente corajosos. A pressão que tem sido feita sobre eles, e vocês sabem que a pressão sobre os dirigentes sindicais é de dois lados. É com o pau e com o rubeçado. É dando garantias especiais, dando proteção especial, por um lado, oferecendo, por um lado, ou fazendo o permanente assédio de que a doutora Rita Garcia Pereira vai falar aqui. E, portanto, agora, um sindicato não pode ser controlado pelos seus dirigentes sindicais que não dão resposta às assembleias, não querem saber do que se passa e funcionam, vão negociar com os administradores sem lidar com os trabalhadores, etc. Mas também não pode ser o contrário. Não pode ser deixar todas as responsabilidades em cima de um dirigente que é democrático. Os dirigentes combativos têm que ser protegidos. E um sindicato não é um lugar onde se paga uma cota para o dirigente prestar um serviço. Um sindicato, para ser democrático e para vencer, tem que ter o envolvimento de todos os trabalhadores e por isso eu deixo aqui o meu apelo também aos trabalhadores de Sines para que o façam. Two minutes to say something. I'm conscious that workers are afraid. And they have many reasons to be afraid because they have to pay the bills, they have to take care of their children, they have to go on with their life. But look for a moment that the feeling of being afraid can change the side. Commodity change is now, as globalization, it doesn't go back. The world is producing in one single way every day. This means that you now have a power that you didn't have 100 years ago. Because 100 years ago, if you stop a factory, that would be a problem of the factory. By the way, the police was hired directly by the owners of the factory and not paid with our taxes at that time. If you had a conflict, the conflict was inside that factory. Nowadays, the workers have an extraordinary power that they don't realize. When you stop a part of the chain, you stop all the chain. Because the just-in-time system, the subcontract system, lives without stocks. If you have a problem with your car, you go to the place to replace it, and they will tell you, oh, we don't have it, comes tomorrow from Denmark, from Germany, from whatever. Food is coming every day to our table from different parts of the world. Everything we need, production has been socialized, but not the production in this sense. So what has been socialized is the way we produce, but not the property and the results of this. So there is a permanent appropriation, a private appropriation of what is commonly produced by the entire society. But this gives extraordinary strength to the workers nowadays. This happens in all sectors. For example, in a hospital, you don't need to stop all the hospital to stop the hospital. You can stop the informatic admission, and you can collect a strike fund because people earn very less, so they cannot do strikes all day, otherwise they are without their salary. But for example, the doctors and the nurse can collect a strike fund to give to the administrative, and you stop the whole hospital in order to make pressure for a better national health service. The same happens in ports, the same happens in transport, the same happens virtually everywhere. So the idea of pension funds, the idea of chain, everything, what is missing here is something that connects you, like the IDC has, and it's so beautiful. It's something about organization, which you know it's very difficult. That's why I've said these words about Felipe. Putting the others together is a lot of work, you know, because we all have our individual problems, our individual feelings, and we don't want to go to the assembly today because it's very late, etc. But we have to show to the workers that the only way is they organize in a democratic base. But for this, they need to participate. And for this, we need to have democratic institutions. But also we can make these institutions more open to the society, less corporative. We can engage in employment, precarious workers, as the union in Lisbon has done, fighting for fixed-term, for long-term contracts for precarious workers. We can have a cultural side because we can transform our struggles in a nice place to be and not in a very boring one. So we could think about, like in this movie of Kel Loach, Jimmy Hall, a nice place where we fight, but we dance, but we meet each other, and we don't need Facebook to find a new boyfriend or girlfriend. So I think there must be thinking. I'm telling this in a very resume way, because my point is we have to reinvent unions. We have to reinvent unions. People are outside of the unions, but we have to bring back an instrument that collectively organizes in a democratic base the working class. And at this point, the working classes, both manual and intellectual, they will understand that if we will have a better world, it will be because of these organized working classes. What we have in IDC is the better example of European Union. If we want to speak about the European Union, which I'm absolutely in favor, we have to look to the IDC that in all Europe has fights for the same job protection of all workers. The European Union we have